Story 1. The City Remembers. The city of Orvain had always felt wrong. It wasn't just the way fog hung thick even in summer, or how alleys never seemed to stay in the same place for long. It was the silence. It crept in through boarded-up windows and broken skylights. It lingered behind the noise of traffic and people. Beneath the familiar was something ancient, something waiting. Silas Marr was a cartographer. Or, more accurately, the last cartographer. Paper maps had long since given way to drones and data streams, but he insisted on the old ways: graphite, compass, vellum. He believed in the shape of places, the way they changed under the pressure of time and memory. Orvain had enough mystery in its bones to keep him sketching for a lifetime. He lived in a crumbling top-floor apartment, walls stained with mold, maps layered like wallpaper. But the real changes began when a narrow street called Heller's End reappeared. It wasn't on any map, not even in archives. No records. No memories. Yet there it stood. Slick cobblestones, gas lamps flickering with orange light, storefronts sealed tight with warped shutters. Silas found it one evening while walking his usual loop. He mapped it carefully. That night, he couldn't sleep. He woke in a cold sweat, convinced someone had whispered his name through the keyhole. The next day, 3 more streets appeared. Then an entire district. All places lost, forgotten. Rebuilt not with modern glass and steel, but brick, soot, and rot. Silas began to chart the reappeared zones meticulously. Every new segment he drew seemed to trigger more to return. Street by street, Orvain expanded. Or rewound. It was impossible to tell. He started to find people, too. A girl in 1920s lace wandering the market stalls of Brimley Row. A conductor waiting for a tram that hadn't existed in 80 years. They looked dazed, hollow-eyed, like paintings that had been partially scrubbed out and redrawn. They didn't recognize him. But some watched him. Some whispered behind closed doors. In the archives of the Cartographic Society, long abandoned but still accessible through a rotten staircase behind City Hall, Silas found a reference in a brittle ledger. The city knows. The ink of its streets bleeds guilt. Do not trace what is buried. That same night, as he traced the outline of a newly appeared alley, the ink on his map began to ripple. The street itself twisted on the parchment, bleeding into other shapes. He heard something move under his floorboards. The deeper he mapped, the stranger things became. Buildings rose overnight, uninhabited but not empty. One house had blood pooled in the corners of the ceiling, as though the violence had reversed gravity. A warehouse blinked with lights that pulsed in Morse code, repeating the same names, over and over. Names of victims. Names of criminals. Dates. Acts. Testimonies. Silas came to understand, the city was rebuilding its memory. Not history. Not architecture. Memory. Collective, repressed, and wronged. Orvain was remembering the crimes done within its walls. Every disappearance. Every betrayal. Every murder. It was putting them back where they happened. Testifying in brick. Crying out in concrete. And Silas. The more he traced, the more he awakened it. Then, one day, he found a district that should never have existed. It wasn't just old. It was expunged. No one had spoken its name in decades. But there it was, appearing in fragments on his desk like a puzzle laid by unseen hands. He hesitated before finishing the final block. Wicks Hollow. His breath caught. He didn't remember the name, but his body reacted. Cold sweat, ringing ears, a tightening in the throat. He walked there, drawn like a pendulum. Past fog-soaked cemeteries and crumbling viaducts. When he arrived, everything felt too still. Doors opened as he passed, without hands. Windows watched. At the heart of the hollow stood a house. Familiar, blackened by time, twisted by guilt. He entered. Inside, every wall was covered in maps. His maps. His handwriting. But one was different. Older. Burnt around the edges. At the center, circled in red, was a building long gone, St. Ignatius Orphanage. He remembered the fire. He remembered locking the doors. He remembered the screaming. He had been a boy. And they had chosen him to escape. Told him to run. Told him to forget. And he had. But the city remembered. In the days that followed, Wicks Hollow fully reappeared. And with it, came the orphans. They stared with vacant eyes, ashen skin. They did not speak. They did not forgive. Silas stopped mapping. He tried to flee. But the streets no longer led out. They led deeper. The city was no longer external. It turned inward, folding like a labyrinth, guiding him to places he'd buried even in his own mind. One day, he opened a door in his apartment and stepped out, not into the hallway, but into a courtroom. Stone. Massive. Walls of broken glass and burned books. An audience of empty chairs. In the judge's seat, the city itself. A face formed from shattered street signs and cracked pavement. Silas stepped forward. No one spoke. A map appeared before him. Blank. He picked up the pen. And began to draw. When Silas was gone, no one noticed. But cartographic records changed. A new street appeared on every map of Orvain. It was crooked. Narrow. Always cold. Its name etched in crooked type. Mars Testament. No one who walked it ever came back the same. Some heard footsteps behind them. Some saw their old crimes written in chalk on the walls. Some were never seen again. And deep in the fog, Orvain continued to grow. One line at a time. One memory at a time. It remembers everything. And it's waiting for you. Story 2. The end is a room. He awoke in silence. No sound. No scent. Just light. White, blinding, clinical. The wall stretched into ambiguity, seamless and smooth, like the inside of a pearl, as if the world had been stripped of all meaning and left only this, sterile, indifferent perfection. He was alone. No door. No window. No shadow to mark the passage of time. He didn't know how long he lay there, blinking. Minutes? Hours? Years? Time here was liquid, or maybe ash. Nothing to measure, nothing to hold. Then the voice came. The world has ended. You are all that remains. It was calm. Disembodied. Neither male nor female. Just there, like gravity. It offered no comfort, no elaboration, no emotion. Simply truth. Or something like it. He screamed. He begged. He wept. He shattered his voice against the smooth white walls, sobbing until his throat was raw. But the voice never changed. There is no escape. This is all that's left. He ran. In circles, in madness. Clawed at the featureless walls until his fingernails split and peeled like old bark. He bled, but it didn't matter. No pain followed, only sensation. No death. Each time he collapsed, the room remained. And he was always in its center. He tried to sleep. But sleep was a lie here. There were no dreams. No forgetting. Time unraveled. Hunger left. Thirst left. Hope disintegrated. Only the room remained. And him. At some point, long after the tears dried and his voice failed, he stopped believing he had a name. What was a name without anyone to speak it? Without a body to wear it, or a history to remember it? He sat. Motionless. Silent. For days. Or centuries. He spoke to the voice, not out of hope. Not to plead. But to hear something. Anything. To remember what sound was. The voice, always patient, never responded. Until one day, it did. You are not who you think you are. He stared into the emptiness, breath caught in his chest. You are a thought. A memory. A final flicker in the dying brain of something ancient. And then his mind broke. Images crashed through his consciousness. Visions too vast for comprehension. Cities that floated in oceans of gas, continents that orbited stars like rings around Saturn. Civilizations that rose and fell in the blink of cosmic time. War. Peace. Rebirth. Obliteration. A being, immense, unknowable, drifting through millennia, burdened by the weight of its own existence. It was not human. It was before humans. Before planets. Before matter, perhaps. And it was dying. He wasn't a man. He never had been. He was a fragment. An echo caught in the implosion of thought. A sliver of identity, a ripple of consciousness pulled from the wreckage of a collapsing God-mind. And the room? The white, endless room? It was not real. It was a construct. A quarantine. A padded cell for fading memories. A digital afterthought, like a firewall around madness. A place where dying pieces of self were kept from infecting the core. He screamed again. But not from fear. From recognition. The voice was not with him. The voice was of him. Another fragment, like him, programmed, or perhaps doomed, to reveal the truth. The moment he understood, the walls began to crack. Not with sound. Not with force. But with reality itself. Like paper soaked in water, the seams of existence peeled back. The clinical white began to distort, bend inward, bleed colorless static into the void. And then, for the first time, he saw beyond the white. He saw nothing. Not darkness. Not emptiness. But nothingness. Pure, uncorrupted. A void so absolute it unmade thought. And in that moment, he felt the last threads of identity begin to dissolve. Then came the twist. The voice returned, but it was no longer calm. It was distorted, warped by realization. It was static trying to scream. You thought you were watching something die. But you were the disease that killed it. He froze. The walls fell away. The room disintegrated. And so did he. His form, his thoughts, his sense of self. Burned away like fog in sunlight. There was no pain. Only understanding. And in that final instant, he knew. He wasn't the memory of the being. He wasn't even a thought. He was its regret. The last toxic spark that infected its soul and brought the end. Story 3. The Fifth Wall. Thomas Bellamy had spent 23 years treading boards beneath limelights, performing monologues and tragedies that left audiences breathless. London knew him by name. He was hailed as one of the greatest stage actors of his generation. But lately, Thomas found the line between performance and reality fraying at the edges. It began subtly. A woman on the tube whispered a line he swore was from a play he'd done a decade ago. A street performer outside the Globe Theatre tipped his hat and said, "Bravo on Act 2, though Thomas hadn't performed in weeks." Then came the repetition. People on his morning walk said the same words in the same tone each day. "Lovely weather," they'd murmur. Always at 9:43 a.m. on the dot. The man selling flowers by the corner never failed to say, "One must appreciate beauty before it wilts," as he handed over a rose. It wasn't just déjà vu. It was precision. And worse still. Every time Thomas paused, unsure of what to say or do, the world around him seemed to wait. Pedestrians hesitated. Birds stilled. Dogs looked up, awaiting a cue. He started to wonder, was he being watched? The breaking point came on a rainless Thursday evening. Thomas returned to his flat to find a thick, black leather-bound folder on his writing desk. No address. No stamp. Just a name embossed in gold. The Life and Lines of Thomas Bellamy. He opened it and felt his chest seize. It was a script. His script. The dialogue inside matched conversations he'd had yesterday, word for word, pause for pause. Even gestures were annotated. Thomas crosses the kitchen to pour whiskey. He hesitates before the first sip. Today's date was at the top of the next page. Friday. Below it, more lines. Things he hadn't yet done. He read through it with disbelief as it described tomorrow in detail. His breakfast routine. A phone call from his agent. An apology to his ex-lover, Julia, whom he hadn't spoken to in 6 months. The next day, it all happened exactly as written. Thomas became obsessed. Each night, the script updated. He tried to stop it. Burn it. Lock it away. But it always returned. Perfectly placed on his desk, rewritten, inevitable. Was it prophecy? Manipulation? Madness? He tested it. He said something not in the script during a conversation at a cafe. The woman across from him blinked, froze slightly, then reset, repeating her previous line. He slapped himself in public. People gasped, then looked away, unnaturally synchronized. One man murmured, "Deviation from stage direction noted." Thomas laughed. He cried. He screamed. The world kept going, like a play that must finish no matter the actor's collapse. But the script noticed. The next version bore a chilling new line. Thomas begins to question the integrity of the script. The writer observes with interest. Who was the writer? He isolated himself in his flat. Covered mirrors. Smashed his phone. Slept in closets and bathtubs. But the script kept arriving. Then came the final entry he ever read. Monday. Thomas receives an invitation. The address leads to an abandoned theater. He goes, despite every instinct. There, he meets the writer. The writer offers him a choice: continue the script or tear it and vanish. Either way, the play continues. Thomas didn't want to go. He told himself he wouldn't. But that night, a letter slid under his door. The stage is set. All that's missing is you. Signed, the writer. The address was real. A derelict theater he vaguely remembered auditioning in as a teenager. Drawn by fear or compulsion, he went. The theater was lit from within, though power had long been disconnected. He stepped onto the dusty stage. The seats were filled. Not with people, but silhouettes. Unmoving. Watching. And on the stage, a figure, tall, elegant, wearing a half-mask. "You've done beautifully, Thomas," the figure said. "You always were our best improviser." Thomas stammered. "What is this? Who are you?" "I'm your playwright," the figure said with a bow. "But more than that. I'm your audience." He held out 2 pages. One blank. One filled. "Write your own lines," said the writer, gesturing to the blank page. "Or follow mine. It matters little. Rebellion is in the script, after all." Thomas stared at both pages. "Is this real?" he asked. The writer laughed softly. "What is reality but a well-rehearsed illusion?" Weeks passed. The flat was abandoned. The world moved on. No sign of Thomas Bellamy. But one day, a new play opened in a small underground theater. No one knew the playwright. It was simply called The Queue. Audience members reported something strange. They said it felt as though the actor wasn't performing a role. They said it felt like he was living something he didn't fully understand. And near the end of the play, Thomas looked directly at the audience and whispered something that wasn't in the script. "Are you watching me? Or am I watching you?" The lights went out. The audience stood in silence, unable to applaud, unsure if the play had ended. Or if they were still in it. Story 4. The Simulacrum Test. Dr. Elias Wren had spent his life chasing the foundations of reality. Not just the particles and forces, but the very rules behind them. A theoretical physicist at the forefront of quantum computation and simulation theory, he had grown increasingly obsessed with one question. If this is all a simulation, who is running it? His colleagues at the Munich Institute for Advanced Physics had begun to whisper. He no longer came to department meetings. He talked to himself. He left cryptic equations scrawled across whiteboards that even the most brilliant minds couldn't parse. Then one night, buried beneath tensor calculations and non-local hidden variable models, Elias found it, a recurring numerical pattern hidden deep in quantum noise, repeating across unrelated experiments. A checksum. Reality, it seemed, was error-correcting itself. He ran simulations again and again. Different equipment, different labs. Always the same result. The moment he tried to share it, his computer crashed. Then his backups. Then the institute server. No one believed him. Some quietly suggested a breakdown. His tenure was suspended pending psychiatric review. Elias retreated to an isolated cabin deep in the Bavarian Alps. There, surrounded by a tangle of server racks and surveillance equipment, he worked to break the simulation. Elias started with minor manipulations. He introduced randomness where there should be none. Left nonsensical, paradoxical symbols carved into tree trunks. He programmed drones to fly in perfect Fibonacci spirals. He reversed his sleep schedule to misalign with circadian expectations. He documented everything. Nothing. Until the fourth week. He woke to find his surveillance logs missing 7 minutes, precisely 420 seconds, across all devices. The footage resumed as if no time had passed, but his coffee was cold. A pen was in his left hand. He was right-handed. And the whiteboard now contained an equation he didn't write. It was elegant. Too elegant. It rewrote his simulation algorithm from first principles. And at the bottom, in his own handwriting. Stop looking. The more Elias poked, the worse it got. Voices on radio static whispered in his own voice but spoke words he didn't know. Animals stared too long. A deer outside his cabin blinked with sideways eyelids. His own reflection, once, did not follow him. Sleep became fractured. When he closed his eyes, he saw HUD overlays. Frames per second, variable labels, and occasionally, a countdown. What unnerved him most was the code. Lines of it, hovering over real objects. Entity ID 039472. Biome, Forest Instance B22. Observer focus, locked. And then. EREN Subject 001, anomaly threshold exceeded. He was not watching the simulation. He was being watched within it. In desperation, Elias created a quantum noise generator that broadcast an unresolvable paradox. A self-referencing, undecidable Gödel sentence rendered as waveform. He believed this would overload the rendering engine. The world froze for 1.7 seconds. Birds midair. Raindrops paused. Even his thoughts slowed. Then it rebooted. A new folder appeared on his offline machine. Hello EREN. Inside, one file, a black and white video. Static. Then a blurry version of himself, speaking directly to camera. Elias. This isn't your discovery. It's your test. You are the variable. The simulation didn't crash. You did. Stop probing. There are worse things than false realities. The video distorted. His face elongated, warped. The file deleted itself. Determined, Elias went to CERN, broke in under cover of night. He aimed to reroute part of the collider's power into a quantum entanglement loop he'd designed. One he believed could cause a recursive error in the simulation. At 2:47 a.m., he activated it. The world did not end. Instead, it folded. Everything around him inverted. Light became geometry, sounds became color. He saw behind the code, structures, strings of logic, vast recursive architectures of algorithms rendered in unknowable dimensions. And then, a terminal prompt. Simulation, active. Test subject Elias Wren, status, aware. Begin reset? Yes, no. A cursor blinked. He reached out. A news report ran 2 days later. Local physicist Elias Wren found deceased at abandoned CERN facility. Authorities cite suicide, though the body showed unusual signs of radiation exposure and cellular degeneration. A cryptic phrase was found etched into the concrete floor, burned in with unknown means. Do not wake the observer. His notes, journals, drives. Gone. Colleagues dismissed his theories as the tragic decline of a brilliant, unstable mind. But occasionally, on CERN's internal systems, a new user appears. Observer 001. No one can trace the login. It disappears after 7 seconds. Final entry in Elias's personal diary. Recovered fragment. What if reality isn't the illusion? What if we are? Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe for more Rogue Nightmares videos.